Good afternoon and welcome back to the Inside Teen Hour. So it's Monday, it's 2 p.m. This is the time where we talk about issues related to teen mental health. And this week in the studio, I've got two therapists here from our local community, actually here in Newhall, who I have the founder and the owner of Tribute, a private practice clinic here in the community. And I got an associate an associate marriage and family therapist from Tribute here, Juliet,
Yes.
right? So Venessa and Juliet, welcome to the studio.
Hi.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for having us, Frederik.
Of course. I think this week is very special with you guys in the studio because this is actually the first time we have some therapist here who has a Christian background or who is sort of spending a lot of time helping and supporting families from the Christian community. And we haven't talked so much about that here on the show, but obviously sometimes your religion or your faith affects a lot on who you want to get support by. And it also can affect, sort of what kind of guidance you would want. You want somebody that understands your culture and understands your background, obviously. So I think it's great that you guys are here in the studio today. Thank you for taking your time and coming in and supporting not just the show, but also the people listening out there.
Of course. Thank you.
Of course. So we're going to talk a little bit about yourself. You're going to tell us who you are and how you ended up in this situation, working with families and teens from our community and helping them through some of the tough times at the moment. We're going to talk a little bit about trauma and how it can affect the entire family system. So why don't we just start, Venessa, Alba, right?
Yes, Venessa Alba.
Good. Tell me, why did you start Tribute? How did you end up here? Are you born and raised here in Newhall, or what's?
No, I'm originally from Peru. I came here when I was 17. And as, I'm sure a lot of people can relate with this. As a daughter of an immigrant, I was supposed to choose something who made everyone proud. We don't come to this country to just do nothing. So I started going to school early for architecture. Then I went to be an interpreter, and then I started working with a psychologist doing interpretation. And she was the one who inspired me to be a therapist. So I graduated a while ago. I'm not ready to say what year was it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's been a long time. I was an ABA, an applied behavioral therapist in the beginning. So I used to go to from house to house to give behavioral therapy to children with autism and other developmental issues. Then I went to school for marriage and family therapists. I actually went to a Buddhist school in Pasadena, where it was really meaningful to me. So I have a second degree on history of religion. So I studied with monks, people, rabbis, and so it was really cool to see how these people were integrating their faith with mental health, which it's like the beginning of the inspiration that I, start having to open a private practice that is directed to Christians. So in our practice, I have 3 offices. There's 2 in Northridge and 1 here in Newhall. My logo has like the little cross,
I saw that,
but I
yes.
never advertised as a Christian therapist because it was really scary for me. People don't relate Christianity with therapy. There's a lot of stigma and a lot of shame to have to ask for to a professional for help when the help comes from God. But my intention is just like this, the help still comes from God, but through someone else, Jesus was the great healer, and that's what I believe we provide there, like that kind of teaching. So it was really hard, and I struggled to put the cross there. But I remember being in the car and telling my husband, this might ruin me. And my 4-year-old was in the back said, like, well, you have to take a leap of faith. Which, being a 4-year-old, I was like, this didn't come from you, So I put that cross there, and it's been overwhelming. And we started with 2 therapists, me and someone else. and we have around 20 therapists now, and this is in the last 4 years. Of course, COVID helped a bunch. But it's been a blessing. We get a lot of referrals from Christians reaching out to try to save their marriages, dealing with their teens and culture, suicidality, that is a huge issue right now in that population, with that population. And just, the idea of, I think, like, Christians being more open to trust someone else, and be more comfortable too, like knowing that you are a Christian or you offer the services. They are more comfortable with, like, talking about their faith or integrating God and the Holy Spirit and all these things that they're integrating and feeling comfortable talking about this with someone else.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that it makes a big difference, right? When you find a therapist that you are going to allow to be part of your life and letting them guide you. And you want to find somebody that you really feel you can relate to, right? Somebody that has some of the same values, or somebody that really can understand you and some of the challenges that you're facing, right? So it makes perfectly sense. Even though I will say, I feel in general we're very sort of in our community, meaning in the treatment world, right? We're very open to the idea that something related to your faith is important, right? There needs to be a higher power sometimes. I think we're often, in the world we live in, I think we often really need to surrender and allow for things sometimes to happen, and not feeling that we have to be in control of everything all the time.
Yeah.
And I think faith, faith sometimes plays into that role, right? It makes it easier to let go of some things and allow for things to maybe play itself out, instead of to get all anxious and having to control the whole thing. But very interesting. And you, Juliet, how did you end up in this field?
Well, a few things I can relate with, and I actually, just like Venessa, I come from an immigrant family, and growing up, it was always that pressure, to do something that your family, everybody can be proud of. And, I dabbled in multiple majors before I ended up in psychology. And family systems, growing up in an Armenian household, we are brought up with the Christian faith, some more so than others. But growing up and seeing how religion has played a part in mental health and motivation and who we are as an individual and as a family system, I always knew that I wanted to be a healer, a helper. I wanted to be there of support in some way or another. So I got into psychology, and, eventually my path led to marriage and family therapy. I graduated back in 2019, and it was a blessing in disguise, not being able to find a job during the pandemic. Because I kept, thinking about, well, why am I not finding a place? Why am I not finding a place? And I wasn't living in this area at the time. So after moving here and, getting the interview and the job at Tribute, it all just started making sense for me, that this is where God wanted me to be. And it took time, and like a lot of things in life, it takes time and it takes patience. But being where I'm at now, after quite a few years of not working in the field, I feel that being able to connect with my clients and being able to hear them, like really hear them on things that they're struggling with, and have that connection, it's really been a blessing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think you told me earlier on today, Juliet, that you Tribute is also out and doing some work in the community. Is that right? You're engaged in the local communities?
Yes. In country and out of country. So I've been doing this for a long time, before Tribute, but we do have like a company on the side who's in charge of buying school supplies for kids before they go to school, clothing. We do Christmas parties and we celebrate their birthdays. And these are kids in the valley from really poor areas and really low economic status. I used to be in a gang prevention program in that was somewhere in the valley,
Yeah.
North Hollywood. And I got to meet these families through going to do therapy and house therapy for these kids. I got to meet a lot of families that were in like great need, and we started that. That was like around 15 years ago. And we recently opened a new company, an extension of Tribute, which is called Harvesters of Hope, and it's a nonprofit that will start soon building houses in Guatemala. You asked me Guatemala, I don't know. I'm from South America, but something I really don't know. So, yeah, we're starting to buy land, and we hope that we can open a little community there for people in need, and we're gonna provide there like mental services and as
Wow.
much as we can.
So provide home and shelter and provide mental health services to the communities.
Yes.
That's great.
You know, the idea of like teaching people how to fish instead of
Instead-
providing the fish all the time, that's the idea. But we're still growing and we're still planning and we're getting to know a lot of people and organizing everything. But yeah, it's really good.
Yes. Are you also involved in your local community, meaning in churches? I'm thinking, are you providing some sort of parent support out in the churches?
So yeah, we get a lot of referrals from churches. I put my name out there. A few years ago, we had a pastor who committed suicide in one of our
sorry.
local churches. And we did a night where a lot of people came to us. They were a bunch of therapists there. We were just trying to support the community. And I got to put my name out there. So we do help local churches, specifically Real Life Church here in Santa Clarita in New Home Ranch. I get most of my referrals from that church. So that's how we help the community.
Yeah.
We also provide like to other churches and community events, providing like pamphlets for mental health and things like that.
Yeah.
We also take one important thing that I'm really proud of is that we are the whole thing was trying to create a nice space for people who have Medi-Cal. One of the things that I thought it was really unfair when I was younger is that when you went to places where they took Medi-Cal, you had to drive to the valley, and
Yes.
you had to go through places that were like nasty. And I wanted to provide a space, a fancy space, a nice space where there's like, in the other place there's cookies and coffee, and I want people to feel welcome regardless of what insurance they have or, how much they
Love it.
pay.
It's great, Vanessa. Yep.
Yeah.
So today, are you able to take Medi-Cal insurance through Tribute today?
Yes, we do.
And-
And yeah, we work with like low fees too.
Yeah, that is amazing because I must say, it is really hard to find without being on a waiting list for months and months, right? To find services if you have a medical insurance. Unfortunately, it's really an underserved community, and it's very difficult with the at Insight treatment programs. We don't take medical. Unfortunately, we can't do it, and it's just a financial thing,
Yeah.
right? That it's just very difficult to be able to provide the services that we want to provide under these medical rates. So so I really appreciate that you're going out of your way to provide services that way, because we need that in our communities. That's for sure.
It's difficult,
In
but
a
I
big
think
way.
it's needed. Yeah, and
There
that's
is.
a way of giving back to my community as well.
Yeah. No, I think here in the community, the only other one that does that, wouldn't that be Child and Family Care Center, or what's it called? The Child and Family.
Yeah.
They provide medical
The
support
one on
here.
Lions right here, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
But well, we were going to talk a little bit about sort of the families that come to you and what they typically are experiencing and how you are helping them in through the private practice or through treatment. Can you give us an example of, how does it look like when a family is seeking your support, your help? What are they typically struggling with? Yeah.
Well, I'll kind of chime in on this one, and it kind of ties into what we were just talking about, the underserved community, and being able to see someone's face light up when they know they can come to a really nice place and have a private setting where they can be vulnerable and they have our support. Just as soon as they find out, like, oh my God, this is possible, it brings a lot of warmth to my own heart to see that and to know that, we've come a long way from, when we were growing up here. So, it's really, really nice to know that we have those services for these individuals. And I think something that is really important in our community and a general community is helping adolescents, guide them through certain struggles that they're going through. So when families do end up coming to us, we can provide them knowledge from our own experiences, knowledge from what we've learned, and knowledge from our own faith.
Absolutely.
So it kind of all ties in. But a lot of what I've seen in the last year or so is we talked about that suicidality, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. And I think adults also suffer from this too, right? Especially after the pandemic. But having families or parents who are from a different generation seeking help for their teens nowadays, right? It's a completely different scene than 10, 20, 30 years ago. So having them tell us, look, I don't know how to talk to my kid. Can you please help guide me, help guide my kid, or help guide us together?
Yeah, back in the day, it was like a betrayal, right?
Yeah.
We need to talk to a therapist. No one needs to know our business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, parents are way more involved now. Parents are really scared about the new, our new culture and the things that our kids are struggling with. It's completely different,
It is. There was a parent that said to me one time, but Frederik, we just don't understand what they're going through. And I looked at the father in this case and said, you're absolutely right. We really don't know what they're going through. We did not grow up in a time where there was something like COVID. We did not grow up in a time where there was something relatable to social media. We just have no idea what all of that means. We really do not know how it feels and what it means to be a teenager in today's world, right? Today's world is really different from when we grew up. That's
but the
for
best
sure.
thing that a dad or a mom can do, I always tell them, like, I'm happy you're curious, because there's a lot I have to learn as a therapist, and I've been learning the last years with my own clients, trying to get on TikTok to see all these trends
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
Yes, but one of the
gotta
things
be curious.
parents struggle a lot to relate to their teenagers, and one of the things that I observe a lot, and I do when I do parenting, is to help them to understand the idea that they still want to relate to the 5-year-old sometimes, and they struggle to grow up with their kids. And as much as you're adding responsibilities, get to know this new person. Sometimes they tell me, I feel like I'm talking to a stranger, and I'm like, maybe you are. This is not your 5-year-old anymore. And curiosity is one of the things that we need to be aware of, and it needs to be there to just get to know this new person. At the same time, create boundaries, but if you don't know this person, what kind of boundaries can I create around this person?
That's right.
And strengthen the relationship.
Yes.
But parents, they come to me and they're like, I think he's bipolar. I'm like, their mood and stuff, and I'm like, that's normal,
It's a teenager sometimes.
Sometimes you want your baby, and that's the only person you know how to relate to.
Yeah, that's true.
But
Well, we have to go into a little break, I'm afraid. But we'll be back. You're listening to the Insight Teen Hour on KHTS 98.1 FM. And I'm here in the studio from Insight Treatment Programs together with Venessa Alba and Juliet Nazaryan, right?
Nazaryan, yes.
Nazaryan, sorry. From Tribute here in our local community here in Newhall. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Hey, welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. This is Frederik from Insight Treatment Programs I am the owner of Insight here in Santa Clarita. It's an intensive outpatient program for teenagers struggling with mental health and drug and alcohol issues. But today in the studio, I've got Venessa, Alba, and Juliet Nazaryan. Nazaryan. Oh, I'm so bad with names.
It took me a year.
I'm from Denmark. In Denmark, we don't have a lot of different names. It's all relatively similar. Anyway, sorry.
You tried. Thank you.
But no, we are in the studio today. We have you guys here in the studio because you Tribute, which is the the private practice that you guys represent here in Newhall, and Tribute is a faith-based private practice, right? You guys all have some relationship with the Christian based, if I'm not mistaken, and I find that that's very unique and very special, and something that I would love to talk a little bit more about. So, tell me, maybe Venessa, if you want to talk about, or if you could tell me some examples of where it's important to have a faith-based therapist to guide you through things. Like, what are some of the problems or some of the issues that are often brought up where you feel that it's important that the therapist has some experience with faith of some sort, whether it's Christian faith or another faith. But yeah, can you give us some examples of where that plays a big role?
So I believe that some of us Christians struggle to go to therapy because we rely on prayer, we rely on all these things that we actually recommend while they go to therapy. It's kind of like a shameful topic too. You know, I'm not able, I seek for God and I seek for his healing, and sometimes people refuse to see therapy as part of the healing process, right? Like, I believe that I'm used by God to help these people get to where they want to get. So people struggle with that. And I was telling you during the break too, like the idea to be able to share as Christians. I gave you an example, like people tell me like, and I heard God telling me this and that. And they're like, you're not going to think I'm crazy, right? And I'm like, no, I know what you're talking about, right? So sometimes they struggle to share this with a therapist if they don't know they're Christian because they're afraid they're going to be labeled with a mental illness. Going around that too, as therapists, we're supposed to take that cultural consideration when I'm not, people from Hawaii talk to spirits, and I'm not going to give them a mental illness, when that's part of their spirituality and part of the culture. So I think the same applies for Christianity. We are supposed to get therapy too. I have therapy once a week. And one of my main concerns was also to talk to my therapist and know about her faith. In this type of, with the insurance company that I have, they're not allowed to ask if they are Christians. So I struggle with that. I mean, on all my sessions, I'm like, I have to tell you something spiritual, but I don't want to diagnose me. You know what I mean? She's like, no, go ahead. And she was able to disclose a little bit, but I feel that it would be my relationship with this person would be somewhere else if I was able to know if she's right there with me, if she validates and understands my experience as a Christian. So that was one of the reasons why, I put that out there. And I wanted people to, because this is the message, I understand you. I ultimately know that God is doing all the work, right? But I'm here with you, and I don't want to be too biblical, but God always sent a friend when people were struggling with mental illness. And I tell him, I can be this friend. God was never intended for us to go through this alone. And he showed, just example of Jesus with 12 people, examples of like in the Old Testament, even Moses couldn't do things by himself and he relied on his brother. Like there's always someone there with you. So this is what I explain my client, because there's a lot of shame when they come to me. They're like, I don't know what to talk about. I feel really shameful to be here. I pray and I do all these things I could to get better, but it seems like I need more help than I thought I did.
Very interesting perspective. I like that. And that makes me think, so another thing is sort of, I would imagine you're also often faced with parents who maybe are using their faith a lot, and the teens sort of rebelling against it. I feel at least that's what we see in our intensive outpatient program, right? Sometimes parents have a faith, whether it's Judaism or whether it's Christian, but that the teens, as part of their development, are sort of pushing that aside or challenging it, or really provoking mom and dad in a big way, because they know that when they push those buttons, then it really hurts mom and dad, and that's sort of the way they can get back at them, if we use that word, or it's a way at least that they can provoke some reaction, and
Trying to be heard.
trying to be heard.
Yeah,
exactly, that's really what it's about,
definitely.
right?
And
They've-
fighting for that individuality, right?
Yeah.
Like that independence. Like,
Exactly.
I don't want to be like you, even though I'm going to end up being like you.
Exactly, right? So I would imagine you guys are often seeing families, or especially parents, coming in being very sort of frustrated, or anxious, or not knowing how to tackle this resistance in their community, whether the teens don't want to show up in the church anymore, or whether they just being rebellious and doing all the things they're not supposed to. Is that right? Or is that a wrong assumption that you guys often have?
No, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And I believe is part of like creating that sense of self, right? We kind of like, there's a point in our life, especially when we're teenagers, that we start rejecting the things that came from our parents in order, but all we're doing is searching for individuality. When you talk about kids of immigrants, I fought against that enmeshment with my family my whole life, where now I'm an adult and I kind of went back to it because I see the value of a collectivist culture. But now it took forever. It's like a middle age crisis, right? But yeah, I think it's just part of, it's very painful for a parent, to experience that, but it is part of the process of becoming your own individual. I would say, if you're talking about faith, God tells us to train our kids in a certain way, that even though they depart later, they'll always come back to it. So I hold to that promise. I have 4 boys, and I went through that, and I mean, they came back, and that's the hope that I give to parents, right? That when you fight something and you enforce something, once you try to become your own individual, you're usually going to reject that. I went to a Catholic school with all girls and nuns.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
I have my aversion, but
story.
yeah. So I mean, it wasn't. That was what my parents offered me, and I'm really thankful for that, because that was the seed, But later I found my own way.
Yeah.
And it is very related, but in my own way, And I think that process of being rebellious and fighting everything that these people who love you are trying to offer from that place of love is just a way of saying, I'm trying to get to know new things, to try new things and see who I am. Which can be really difficult for a parent.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you come back to the idea that if it is that difficult, and actually you use the word pain, right? It can be very painful.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good word to use in that, because it is very painful. And that's when you need support, right? Why go through that pain alone? Maybe you don't share it with your spouse, maybe you do, but to have somebody else around that sort of can talk to that pain and guide you through that. And I think that's very important, instead of continue to increase the conflict at home and increase the pressure on the teens to do the right thing. Right?
Yeah, and I tell parents, like, if your intention is that I'm going to grab a Bible and I'm going to hit your kid with my Bible on the head, like,
You're gonna
that's
be
not what
surprised.
therapy
Yeah.
is. This is a place where they can be themselves, they can explore themselves. I tend to not lean my clients towards making a decision, especially if they're younger. It's mostly just exploring and getting to understand themselves, also to understand their parents. It's hard for kids to see where the parents are coming from. Like, I always say this, like, your parents have a vision of you. and it's a good vision. It might not be what you want, but it's a vision, and they're gonna fight for that vision.
Good point.
They're gonna fight to make that possible, because with their feelings and everything they know about you, or they think they know about you, they can see this at the end of the tunnel. So they have an image of what's going to happen with you. For them, it's very difficult to let that go too.
Interesting saying that. In at our facility, we have this big warehouse space, and in the warehouse there's this huge mirror on the wall that the counselors and the kids actually created when we opened up the facility here in Santa Clarita. And there's beautiful colors, but then in all these colors there's some drips down the wall. And it says on top, every drip tells a story. And when I asked the counselors, so why did you guys create this? And some drips, they go straight down towards the floor and stop halfway. Others go all the way to the floor, and some bounces or goes like a snake, right? But the concept is that every drip tells a story, meaning every kid has their own story. And parents, as you say, sometimes have a very hard time acknowledging or allowing for the kids to have their own little path, right? They have this vision, and they're going to fight for it, and because of the best of their heart, of course, right? But sometimes we need to educate parents a lot on, hey, look, every kid is different. Every drip here that you're looking on the wall tells a different story about a kid. And just because it wasn't the exact way that you expected, doesn't mean it's not going to be a beautiful story and a beautiful life and a beautiful path for your teen.
Yeah,
right?
And it's very painful to see your kid struggling, right? Like, as soon as I see one of my kids not feeling okay, and I don't know, I've read a lot of research about like umbilical cord connection and all. I tell them everything, please, like, I'm sorry, I'm being intrusive and stuff like that, but I'm very empathetic towards I can feel their emotions. So sometimes I have to stop myself and tell myself, he must feel sad in order to experience happiness. So I'm actually interrupting a process that is a must for him to develop rightly, in a right way. You cannot give a kid a piece of candy every time they're feeling something, because that's how they're going to cope. They're going to learn to not feel, but to jump to something that is like, an easier reward. And that becomes really problematic when they get to an age where they can use drugs, and not a candy anymore.
Of course.
So sometimes as a parent, especially with my teenagers, I have to stop myself and I have to say, he must feel this. I have to step aside.
Yeah, that's good. Allow for the process to take place.
Yeah,
right?
If you see that they're struggling for a week or two, but intervene.
Makes sense. And now you say intervene. I know we only got a couple of minutes left, but I just want to throw this in here, and we can maybe talk more about it after the break. But when you talk about intervene, we quickly spoke about how do you know what your teens do? How do you show curiosity for their lives? Like, how do you get involved in the teens' sort of? We spoke about in the break saying, hey, do you check their phones? What do you guys usually, how do you guide parents through that? How do they get to know their teens when the teens are sort of pushing away and don't want to open up much? Like teens usually do.
So, I encourage parents to be really involved. Social media, most of my parents that found like suicidal notes or anything like that, it was found through social media. So it's not a bad idea to be, part of it. It's not going to make your teen happy, but come on, we never make them happy. It's all right.
We need to be their parents, right? That's more important than making them happy. We're not there to be their best friend. We're there to
keep them safe,
and hold boundaries, and be their parent.
And once I read in a book that talks about childhood and adolescence that some kids, when the parent is not involved and give them that freedom, one of the reasons why the guy thinks that suicidality is up is because the kids is not sensing that this is part of my parents letting me be independent. They get a sense of abandonment from the parent when the parent is not involved. When I'm having all these feelings and my parents are ignoring it, I have a sense of abandonment.
Makes sense. Well, I'm sorry, we got to go into a little break again. Time flies. But you're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM. This is the Insight Teen Hour, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. Here in the studio, I got Juliet, Nazaryan, and Venessa, Alba. Finally got it.
Time's the charm.
From Tribute here in our local community. A private practice with, Venessa has got like 20 therapists in the private practice, right? So, anyway, we are talking about faith-based sort of support and Christianity and how important it is that there are therapists that has that background and how they can support parents that are following a religion of some point, in this case Christianity. But Juliet, we've spoken in the break a little bit about how important it is to create a safe environment at home, and how you guys are helping parents to be able to talk to their teens about things that come up in the family and sort of create this safe environment so that the teens don't hold on to secrets and create a lot of shame and, these kind of things build up in the family system.
Definitely. So a few things, and I think we touched base on this earlier on, and talking about parents not really understanding the kids of this generation, and it goes vice versa, right? Because the kids don't really understand where their parents are coming from, where these comments are coming from, where the need to be connected to faith is coming from. So one thing that I strive for, and I think that as therapists we all strive for this, is building a safe space in a therapy room. And having that space where we provide acceptance, where what you say to me, I will not judge you, and I will accept you for who you are and what you say. And once you provide that space, they kind of slowly start to open their eyes to, okay, so if this is possible here, and as we talk about communication and acceptance and how do we talk to our parents and vice versa, sometimes having family sessions, right? And working on, well, let's do role playing. And role playing, how do we talk to each other? And sometimes correcting them or guiding them the right way, because I think communication is so important. Being able to, like we were talking about individualism, right? Teenagers, they're trying to find out who they are. They're trying to become their individual self. But parents are like, well, I want you to be this way. Instead of asking, like, what is it that's making you want to be this way? And having that open communication. So then it goes back to religion. And I know that multiple religions are the same way, where there's a lot of shame behind sins that they commit, behind keeping secrets, and all the other topics that we can go on talking forever about, right? So kids feel shameful. They feel some kind of guilt to even bring those topics up. And having that place in a therapy setting to even talk about it and feel like there's some normalcy there, that I can talk about this without getting in trouble. I can talk about this without getting judged or reprimanded in any way, shape, or form. So I think working on acceptance and communication has been a big portion of what I've done with parents, and having them understand their kids and having their kids understand where their parents are coming from. And I've noticed that we were talking about earlier, they do try to stem away from the religion. They do try to push away, right? Push the parents away. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't understand why I have to go to church, right? And the parents are like, well, you have to, because this is how it's supposed to be. And having, the different parenting styles that there are, instead of being authoritative and saying you have to go, using more of a sorry, that was authoritarian. Having the more authoritative, where you tell them, yeah, it's important that you go because of this and this reasons, but giving them the space to talk to you without telling them, well, you committed a sin, and this is what's going to happen after.
But maybe also help mom and dad, I feel often is important to help mom and dad be vulnerable in these situations and sort of acknowledge, hey, look, these are the reasons why this is what it does to me emotionally when I'm asking you to go to church and you don't want to be part of it. This is how I feel. I feel our family's breaking up. I feel, trauma from my own experiences at home. I feel all sorts of ways about it, right?
Yeah.
So to help parents become vulnerable in these situations and not just be, sorry, this is what you have to do, and because I say so. Don't get me wrong. I am a big believer that parents often needs to be able to say, hey, this is what we need you to do. I'm sorry, but you are our daughter or you are our son.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hold the boundary. I don't want, exactly. We at Inside are big believer that parents needs to hold these boundaries and stuff. But when that's said, obviously sometimes it's also important that as a parent you're able to open up and be a little bit more, be vulnerable.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which
I'm not
is
grounding
hard.
you. This is not punishment. This is this, and that. I have my oldest one always fought me for church, like to not go to church. But I found, I help him to find ways on how to outlive his faith, and he was into missions, and he started going to mission trips, and I understood that church is not for everyone. But he still can believe in God and create like a strong faith, because that's what he does, and then he honors God. He's like, so like this, and I never thought he would, but we all have different, some of us are visual learners, some of us are like, so we have different ways to live our spiritual life and to connect with our Creator.
Definitely.
So I think we have to be curious as parents too. Like, what is it that bothers you? Why you don't want to go?
Yeah. Well, thank you both of you guys for your inspiration and for your perspective. I think it was great having you guys in the studio. I actually hope you guys will be back, because I feel there's a lot of things we haven't talked about. But before we end up, we just got a couple of seconds left. Sorry. Maybe how can people contact you guys if they want to hear more, if they are struggling and would like to have some faith-based support? What is your website and phone number? And
So the website is TributeCPS.com. So Tribute and C as in Carl, P as in Paul, S as in Sandra.com. And my phone number is 818-927-1284. And we do have some openings here in Santa Clarita and Northridge.
For therapists.
For therapists.
Okay,
And
good.
I will say,
well, we're looking for therapists.
we
Go ahead.
are. We
Oh,
definitely
sorry.
are. If there are any therapists out there that are looking for positions, Tribute is one of